The night before I was meant to marry Mark Thompson, the man I had loved since we were children, my sister came to me. She found me in my hotel suite, the sprawling white wedding dress hanging like a ghost in the corner. She didn't say anything at first, just placed a grainy black and white photograph on the polished table between us. It was an ultrasound. Her voice was flat, without a trace of the shame I might have expected. When she finally spoke, "He's Mark's." She wanted me to call off the wedding, to step aside. I refused, clinging to the shattered remnants of my future. That refusal sealed my fate. When her threats and pleas failed to move me, she chose a more permanent way to destroy my life. She left behind a suicide note that painted me as a villain, then jumped from the hotel roof. She took 2 lives with her that day, and in doing so, ensured my own life would be a living hell. From that moment on, Mark, my childhood sweetheart, looked at me with a hatred that burned colder than any fire. He saw me not as his grieving fiancé, but as the murderer of the woman he truly loved. Our marriage went forward, a grotesque parody of the dream I once had. He forced me to have his child, a desperate attempt on my part to mend the unfixable, only for him to end our baby's life with his own hands, strangling him in his cradle. I can still see his eyes, bloodshot and insane with grief, as he gripped my chin, forcing me to look at him. "Clara Evans," he spat, his voice a venomous whisper. "Her child never got to see this world, so yours doesn't deserve to live in it either." And then, I was reborn. I opened my eyes not to the sterile white of a hospital room after a fatal complication in another pregnancy, but to the familiar silk of my pajamas the day before the wedding. My second chance began on the eve of the banquet, and this time I saw the sly, calculating cunning in my sister's eyes for what it was. I offered her a faint smile, a mask for the cold fury that was solidifying in my soul. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like triumph on my tongue. "I agree to call off the engagement." My first life ended with an amniotic fluid embolism. The last thing I remembered was the feeling of my life draining away, soaking the hospital bed in a tide of crimson. I had begged Mark to save me, to just help me, but he had looked at me with the cold indifference one might reserve for a stranger. He gripped my neck, his words a final brutal blow. "So what if we were engaged first? Eliza and I were in love. You were the one who insisted on tearing us apart. You're the reason she died with her child. What right does a vicious woman like you have to be my wife? Go to hell and beg Eliza for her forgiveness." The irony was staggering. They were the ones having the affair, the ones who betrayed me, yet I was the one left to bear the weight of all the consequences. Eliza Evans was my father's illegitimate daughter. I had found her living a difficult, unstable life, and my heart had gone out to her. I convinced my father to bring her into our home, to give her the life she deserved as his child. I never could have imagined that single act of kindness, that moment of compassion, would be the catalyst for the complete and utter destruction of my life. Eliza was a master of deception. From the moment she stepped into our house, she played the part of my loving, grateful younger sister, all while systematically seducing my fiancé behind my back. By the time I uncovered their betrayal, she was already pregnant with Mark's child. I will never forget the look in her eyes, a triumphant, provocative gleam, when she showed me the ultrasound. "Sister," she had purred, "we're both daughters of the Evans family. Everything you have, I want too. And Mark, well, he's mine now." She believed her pregnancy was a golden ticket into the wealthy Thompson family. She was wrong. The Thompsons, particularly the family matriarch, never acknowledged her. They made it clear that I, Clara Evans, was the only daughter-in-law they would ever recognize. The scandal of her affair with her sister's fiancé spread like wildfire through the city, making her a public spectacle, the subject of gossip and ridicule. Eliza, in her twisted logic, blamed it all on me. So, on the day I was to be married, she leapt from the hotel roof, dying at the precise moment Mark loved her the most, forever cementing herself as a martyr in his mind and condemning me to live in her shadow. Even the foundation of our marriage was a transaction. The Thompson family's business was on the verge of collapse, their capital chain broken. It was my dowry, Millions of dollars from the Evans family that stabilized Mark's position as the heir, and for all my sacrifice, for all my love, my life ended in a blood-soaked hospital bed, alone and hated. I remember laughing in despair, my voice cracking as I told him, "Love isn't about who came first." Mark had just frowned. "Love might not be," he'd said, "but people should have basic decency, propriety, integrity." That was when the dam of my restraint broke. Decency? Integrity? I laughed until tears streamed down my face. "Mark, I brought millions to save your family from ruin. You repaid me by having an affair with my own sister, breaking your promises and abandoning all morality. You want me to repent?" "Yes, I should repent. I should repent for ever marrying you, for fighting for you within your own family. I'll be watching from wherever I go. I'll watch you lose the support of my family and see how long you can hold on to your chairmanship then. I will wait for the day you fall into a hell you can never climb out of." After one last, desperate cry of anguish, I finally closed my eyes, filled with an ocean of regret. If I could only start over, I would never live this way again. Worthless men and treacherous women could all go to hell. "Clara, wake up! Your sister is using that baby to try and force everyone to give in to her." An anxious voice sliced through the fog in my head. My skull felt like it was splitting in two. When I forced my eyes open, the worried face staring down at me was my best friend, Sophie. I had been reborn. I was back, the day before my wedding to Mark. Sophie was already fighting for me, her voice filled with indignation. "Eliza has no shame. If you hadn't taken pity on her and brought her here, where would she be now? And this is how she repays you? By seducing your fiancé? An illegitimate child dares to dream of taking your place and marrying into a wealthy family." In my past life, she had said these exact words, and they had fueled my rage and heartbreak. Now, hearing them again, I felt nothing but a cold, calm resolve. Eliza truly believed that by seducing Mark and getting pregnant, she could just slide into my place and marry into the Thompson family. She was dreaming. Mark was handsome, but he was ultimately a weak man, easily swayed by a pretty face. The Thompson family matriarch, however, was not. She could see a manipulator from a mile away. She had immediately rejected my father's tentative suggestion of a substitute bride, stating firmly that the Thompson family's daughter-in-law could only be me. Eliza had lost her moral standing and her dignity, which is why she was downstairs right now, putting on a show of weeping and begging on the eve of my wedding. I shook my head and gave a small, humorless laugh. My gaze was firm as I looked at Sophie. "Don't worry," I said. "She won't be marrying into the Thompson family." Eliza had been personally rejected by old Mrs. Thompson. Even if Eliza herself had no sense of shame, the Evans family still had a reputation to uphold. Sure enough, the moment I walked downstairs, I heard the sharp crack of a teacup smashing against the floor. "You disgrace!" My grandmother's voice boomed. "How dare you show your face here and beg for anything after doing such a shameful thing?" Eliza was kneeling on the floor, her shoulders shaking with pitiful sobs. "Grandmother," she cried, "you and Mrs. Thompson are old friends. Who else can I turn to? Besides, everyone just says an Evans daughter is marrying a Thompson son. I'm an Evans daughter too. Why should my sister be the only one to marry into a prominent family? You can't show favoritism." My grandmother was shaking with rage. "How dare you? You seduced your own sister's fiancé, and you expect me to throw a party and send you off in her place? If I had known you were such a shameless creature, I never would have agreed to let your father bring you into this house. Someone tie her up and lock her in her room. Don't let her out to embarrass us before the wedding tomorrow." I watched coldly as the maids moved to grab Eliza. My expression was like ice. Eliza suddenly tore herself away from them and rushed toward me, her face contorted with venomous rage. "Clara, Mark and I are in love. Even if you marry him, you'll never have his heart. I'm carrying his child. Sooner or later, he'll bring me into the Thompson family. Don't you dare think you can take my place." My grandmother's face went pale with fury, her pointing finger trembling. Just then, the sound of confident footsteps came from the doorway. Eliza saw Mark approaching out of the corner of her eye. and her expression changed in an instant, a masterful performance of emotional whiplash. She dropped to her knees at my feet, her face a mask of tear-streaked pleading. Sister, it's all my fault. It's all Eliza's fault. I'll accept any punishment. I'm only begging you to spare the child. Please, don't force me to have an abortion. The next moment, she let out a piercing scream and threw herself backward as if she'd been violently pushed. The look she shot me was full of triumphant cunning, as if her plan had worked perfectly. But I hadn't moved a muscle. I hadn't laid a single finger on her. A cold sneer formed on my lips as I felt the frozen blood in my heart begin to thaw. In my last life, she used her weakness as a weapon to ruin me. Did she really think the same trick would work a second time? Sister, why did you push me? I shrieked, my voice even more pitiful and terrified than hers. I let my body go limp, my face a canvas of pure terror, as I tumbled backward down the grand staircase. Clara! Eliza! Before my consciousness faded, the last thing I heard was a chorus of panicked shouts ringing in my ears. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, the antiseptic smell sharp in my nostrils. Through my slitted eyelids, I could hear Mark and my grandmother arguing just outside the door. Mrs. Evans, Mark said, his voice cold and hard. Eliza has been nothing but patient, but Clara continues to be aggressive and cruel. How is someone like that worthy of being a daughter-in-law to the Thompson family? I felt a slight frown crease my brow, but quickly relaxed my face. My father might have been conflicted between his two daughters, but my grandmother was always firmly on my side. It was my granddaughter who was pushed down the stairs by that wretched girl and is still unconscious. My grandmother's voice was like ice, sharp and unforgiving. She didn't even bother to hide her contempt. Mr. Thompson, I may be old, but I am neither deaf nor blind. My grandmother had been the matriarch of the Evans family for decades. Her words carried immense weight. Mark was momentarily taken aback, but he recovered quickly. Fine, let's put that aside for now, he said. The wedding is tomorrow. If you refuse to let Eliza take her sister's place, then I would rather call off the engagement entirely than marry a malicious woman like Clara. His voice turned threatening. Mrs. Evans, surely you wouldn't want your precious granddaughter to carry the stigma of being rejected at the altar, would you? My grandmother hadn't expected him to be so utterly shameless for Eliza's sake. In my previous life, she had sternly refused him, which set off a chain reaction of disasters. But this time, I wouldn't let that happen. I reached out and gently tugged on her sleeve. My grandmother, ever perceptive, understood immediately. Since I was awake but keeping my eyes closed, I must have wanted to speak to her privately. You can go, she said to Mark. I need to think about this. Mark, smugly assuming he had found her weak spot, strode proudly to the next room to check on Eliza. Clara, you're awake. My grandmother's aged face was filled with relief and surprise. She guessed that I had heard their conversation and quickly tried to comfort me. My dear child, I know how much you like Mark. Don't you worry. As long as I'm here, that troublemaker Eliza won't ever take your place. My precious granddaughter will be the only daughter-in-law of the Thompson family. Looking at her wrinkled face, my heart ached with a profound sadness. In my last life, my unhappy marriage had caused her to worry day and night. When she found out Mark had killed my first child, the shock was too much for her heart to bear, and she passed away. This time, I would make sure she stayed by my side, healthy and happy. Grandma, I don't want to marry him anymore, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Let's call off the engagement. My grandmother knew better than anyone how deeply I had loved Mark. She looked at me in disbelief. What did you just say? Staring up at the stark white ceiling tiles, I let the memories of my horrific death in my past life wash over me. My eyes stung. Call off the engagement. How can you spend a lifetime with someone so cold-hearted and cruel? But you begged me for so long to help secure this marriage, she said, her voice full of pity. Only my grandmother knew the lengths I had gone to in order to win the favor of the entire Thompson family. The matriarch was a devout Buddhist, so I had made a pilgrimage to a distant mountain temple to fetch her consecrated prayer beads. For her 80th birthday, I had copied out Buddhist scriptures in my own blood. It was all to earn her special favor. But it didn't matter how much she liked me. Mark's heart was a fortress I could never breach. In this lifetime, I refuse to waste another second of my life on him. Perhaps the fall cleared my head, I said, my voice taking on a mocking tone. It's made me understand a lot of things. What's there to miss about a man who has an affair with his own sister-in-law? A man who will stop at nothing to get what he wants? How could a person like that ever be trusted with my life? Just then, Mark walked out of the neighboring room, supporting Eliza. Seeing that I was awake, he immediately adopted a commanding tone. It's good that you're awake, Clara. If you don't want to be the laughingstock of the entire city, you'll obediently let Eliza take your place in the wedding. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. After listening to my earlier resolve, my grandmother was much calmer now. An act as disgraceful as substituting a bride is something the Evans family would never do, she stated coolly. If you insist on changing the bride, then the marriage alliance between the Thompson and Evans families is canceled. I watched Mark's face and saw exactly what I expected, a flicker of panic in his eyes. I knew it. He wanted Eliza as his bride, but he did not want to sever ties with my family. The Thompson and Evans families were two of the most prominent families in the city. News of their union had been public knowledge for months. More importantly, the Thompson family business was in trouble, and they were desperately waiting for my multi-million-dollar dowry to bail them out. If he broke off the engagement now, old Mrs. Thompson would probably skin him alive. Mark's demeanor softened. "Grandmother, why get so upset?" he said, trying to sound reasonable. "The marriage is a done deal. Eliza and Clara are both Evans' daughters. What's the difference which one I marry? If this gets blown out of proportion, it will just make both our families look foolish." Eliza was also terrified at the mention of canceling the engagement, a sheen of cold sweat on her brow. I sneered inwardly. It was simple, really. Without taking my place, a woman of her status and background would never step foot through the Thompson family's front door in her lifetime. She hurriedly knelt at Mark's feet, pleading pitifully. "Mark, it's all my fault. Don't let my mistakes tarnish the reputations of our families. Just leave me and the child to manage on our own." Such carefully chosen words, designed to sound selfless, only made Mark see her as more noble. Moved and frustrated, he exclaimed, "Eliza, how can you be so kind? Even now you're still thinking of sacrificing yourself." My grandmother could no longer stand it. "If she were truly kind, she wouldn't have seduced her own sister's fiancé," she retorted coldly. "I fear some people are blind." Mark sensed something was wrong and frowned, looking down at Eliza. She immediately panicked, shaking her head as tears fell like broken strings of pearls, a truly pitiful sight. "No, Mark, it's not like that. I didn't know you were my sister's fiancé at the time. I just couldn't help myself. I'll get rid of the baby right now, so you and my sister won't be troubled." She made a show of getting up to leave. Mark, seeing the beautiful woman in tears, immediately cast aside his suspicions. He grabbed her hand as if she were made of delicate glass. "Silly girl, don't say such things. Who would dare lay a hand on my child?" With that, his gaze turned back to me, filled with resentment. "You cruel woman! Eliza is already in this state. Do you have to drive her to her death before you're satisfied?" I laughed, a sound raw with fury. "Drive her to her death? Mark, you are truly a master at shifting blame. You're the one who did something shameless, yet you're trying to pin it all on me. Besides, if you and Eliza are so deeply in love, why don't you go plead your case to your grandmother? Swear to old Mrs. Thompson that you'd rather give up your status as the eldest son of the family to be with Eliza. What could she possibly do then? In the end, you just want to have your cake and eat it too. You can't let go of this beautiful woman, but you're even more reluctant to let go of your wealth and status." I looked directly at him, then lowered my eyes, pretending to be moved by their tragic love story. "Since you two are truly in love, I can't stand in your way." Eliza thought I was about to agree to the substitution, and a smug look began to form on her face. I then added, feigning difficulty, "However, this isn't something I can decide on my own. It still requires Mrs. Thompson's approval. Since you insist on marrying each other, then go back and get her permission. If she agrees to have my sister marry you, our family will have no objections." The moment I said this, my grandmother flared up. "How could we let that girl marry into the Thompson family? but I gave her a subtle shake of my head, signaling her to remain calm. In my past life, I was married into that family for 5 years. I knew the old matriarch's temperament inside and out. She would never allow a seductress like Eliza to enter her household. That was why Mark had been working on me, trying to get me to yield. But I wasn't going to make it easy for this pair of traitors. You want to marry Eliza? Fine. First, get past your grandmother. Sure enough, Mark said angrily, Clara, do you really think I don't dare? Just you wait. With that, he stormed off, helping Eliza along. Watching his retreating figure, I sneered. Mark, in our last life, I refused to let her take my place to save face. In this life, I'll do exactly as you wish. I can't wait to see the chaos that erupts when you go to your grandmother on the eve of your wedding and demand to swap brides. My child, you've suffered so much, my grandmother said, her eyes full of tenderness and guilt, believing our family had wronged me. Don't worry, Grandma will find you a better man. I couldn't help but laugh at myself, my long lashes casting shadows on my cheeks as images of my miserable death flooded my mind. All men were the same. What difference did it make who I married? In this life, I only wanted to live for myself, to be happy and free. Grandma, why are you in such a hurry to marry me off? Don't you want me to stay home and keep you company a little longer? I said, clinging to her arm playfully. Silly child, she said, holding my hand lovingly. Even if I wanted to keep you, I couldn't let you stay unmarried your whole life. My granddaughter is the finest girl in the city. Mark choosing that little wretch is his loss. Are you going to give up on marriage forever because of one bad experience? You're still young and life is long. If you retreat at every hardship, what will you do? You're good in every way. You always put my heart at ease. Except for one thing, you're too invested emotionally. Deep affection never lasts, and extreme intelligence can bring harm. You must learn to love, but not without reservation. Do you understand? Deep affection never lasts. Extreme intelligence invites harm. Hearing my grandmother's words was like watching the sun break through the clouds. My heart trembled with a sudden, profound realization. In my past life, I had pondered this for years and never understood. Yet my grandmother had clarified it in a few simple words. The barren field inside my heart began to sprout new life. Yes, if even that despicable couple deserved love, why couldn't I? Should I give up my right to happiness because of temporary pain? My father had no sons, only my sister Eliza and me. My grandmother had raised me with the discipline and education typically reserved for a male heir. If not for that, I wouldn't have had the skills and knowledge to help Mark seize power and secure his position as chairman of the Thompson family in my past life. Now that I've been reborn, how could I possibly remain defeated? It was a pity that I had been so foolish before, believing that sheer effort and devotion could earn genuine affection only to meet such a tragic end. My grandmother's tone suddenly changed and a mysterious smile played on her lips. If I say you'll marry into the Thompson family, then you will marry into the Thompson family. Grandmother, what do you mean? I asked, surprised. She revealed a shrewd, elegant smile. The Thompson family has more than one son. There are plenty of fine young men. My granddaughter won't just marry, she'll marry in style. The Thompson family's other sons. I thought for a moment, and then a cool, refined figure flashed through my mind. I exclaimed in surprise, You want me to marry Mark's uncle? To be honest, I did have some history with this man, Daniel Thompson. In my last life, after Mark had taken his revenge on me by killing our child, the Thompson family had grown increasingly cold toward me. I was their young mistress, yet I often couldn't even get a hot meal. It was Daniel, that distinguished and quiet man, who had brought me warm porridge every day for an entire month. It was a simple kindness, but it was one of the few moments of warmth I experienced during my 5 years in that house. Unfortunately, Mark feared his uncle's capabilities and had secretly poisoned him, which eventually led to his terminal illness. Calculating the timeline, Mark should have just recently started poisoning his uncle. Now that I've been reborn, perhaps I could change his fate as well. My grandmother looked at me with admiration. Yes, Although Daniel is 7 years older than you, he is a steady and responsible young man. The old lady hasn't made up her mind yet. The Thompson family's future heir is still undecided. She patted my hand. Clara, you must seize this opportunity. Hearing this, my eyes, which had been dull with despair, finally lit up. The inheritance. Yes, I had almost forgotten. At this point in time, old Mrs. Thompson hadn't officially announced the heir. In my previous life, Mark secured the position only with my family's support and my strategic help. This time, I wanted to see just how far he could go without me. The next day, both the Thompson and Evans families released news simultaneously. The wedding between the Evans family's eldest daughter and the Thompson family's eldest son was canceled. Immediately after, an even more shocking announcement was made. Daniel Thompson and I were engaged. I was originally supposed to marry the nephew, but I ended up engaged to the uncle instead. Instantly, the entire city was in an uproar. As I expected, when Mark told old Mrs. Thompson his intention to marry Eliza, the old lady had scolded him mercilessly. In the end, it was Mark's father who stepped in to mediate, saying they would discuss Eliza's entry into the family after she gave birth. However, he insisted that the child must be a boy for her to be accepted. The Thompson family clearly looked down on her, but after receiving this conditional promise, Eliza acted as if she had received a royal decree and couldn't wait to come and flaunt it in my face. Sister, oh sister, you didn't expect this, did you? In the end, I'm the one who will have the last laugh, she sneered, her eyes filled with a twisted pleasure. Daniel, that sickly man, won't live for many more years. Soon, the entire Thompson family will belong to Mark, and then I'll be the mistress of the household. I can't wait to see the day when you'll be groveling at my feet. This was the part that had puzzled me the most in my past life. I looked directly at her and said, each word deliberate, Eliza, I have treated you well. If I hadn't taken pity on her and brought her into our home, she would still be struggling on her own. I had fulfilled my duty as an elder sister and never mistreated her. Eliza, why do you hate me so much? Treated me well? She let out a sharp, grating laugh, her face contorting with fury. Clara, stop being so hypocritical. Your kindness was nothing but you tossing me scraps from your table. We are both our father's daughters. We share the same blood. So why did you get to grow up in luxury while I was left homeless? Why could you marry into a noble family while I couldn't even step through their gates? Clara, you've been on your high horse for too long. It's time you tasted what it's like to have nothing, just like I did. Starting today, I will take everything that belongs to you. I listened in prolonged silence, and in the end, I could only find it laughable. My kindness had unwittingly nurtured a wolf. I've seen ungrateful people before, but she set a new standard. Fine, I said coolly. Consider it my mistake, my sincerity wasted on a dog. But the one thing you should never have done was gamble with the reputation of the entire Evans family for your own selfish desires. You had an affair with your brother-in-law, but did you ever stop to think how people would talk about our grandmother or our family? Eliza seemed to find this hilarious, laughing so hard that tears nearly streamed down her face. Grandmother? The Evans family? What do they matter? My own happiness is what's most important. She was utterly selfish, completely oblivious to the fact that a great family rises and falls together. She only cared for her own pleasure. Gazing at that dark, twisted face, the resentment and pain from 2 lifetimes finally hardened my resolve. I walked toward her, clutching my chest as if I were deeply wounded. People who walk different paths can't travel together, I said. Leave. Eliza snorted coldly and turned to go. Taking advantage of the fact she was still within earshot, I deliberately said to Sophie, "Has my jade Buddha statue been delivered?" I knelt before the temple for 3 days and 3 nights to obtain it, and then I had a master craftsman carve it so it bears a slight resemblance to Mrs. Thompson. She's sure to love it when she sees it. My voice was pitched perfectly, not too loud and not too soft. Eliza would definitely hear it. Sophie, being naturally straightforward, quickly covered my mouth. "Hey, she hasn't left yet," she whispered, afraid Eliza would steal my idea. I smiled faintly. Sophie was so naive. Stealing my idea was nothing. Stealing the actual object was what Eliza excelled at. Sure enough, upon hearing my words, Eliza paused mid-step. A sly smirk curled at the corner of her lips before she walked away. See, she definitely heard that, Sophie exclaimed urgently. I smiled with unwavering confidence. Oh, really? But I wanted her to hear it. Eliza believed her looks and intelligence were equal to mine. She didn't realize that an outsider like her could never match the subtle cunning of a young lady raised in a noble household. If I hadn't trusted her so blindly in my past life, she never would have had the chance to harm me. Sophie, fetch the Buddha statue for me, I said after Eliza was gone. I walked to the table and lit a red candle. I let the wax melt, dripping it carefully into the Buddha statue's mouth and nose, then quickly wiped away the excess with a cotton cloth, ensuring the statue looked flawless from the outside. Clara, what are you doing? Sophie asked, her face full of confusion. Nothing much, I replied with a cold smile. Just leading Eliza to her own destruction. Early the next morning, the Thompson family hosted a banquet. Both Eliza and I attended. Once there, Sophie exclaimed loudly beside me, What? It's gone! How could such a large Buddha statue just disappear? Pretending not to notice Eliza's smug smirk, I lowered my head and said, I don't know, it was right on the table, let's look again. While Sophie and I made a show of frantically searching, Eliza was practically trembling with excitement, her face twisted in glee as she tightly clutched the wooden box in her hand. Sister, oh sister, she must have been thinking. You truly are my dearest sister, paving the way for me once again. She saw how I had won Mrs. Thompson's favor, so she assumed the gift I prepared would surely please the old matriarch. Last night, she had sneaked into my study and stolen the statue. Little did she know that what won Mrs. Thompson's favor was not a gift, but sincerity. Moreover, the old lady was already deeply dissatisfied with Eliza for causing so much turmoil. Eliza thought she could make up for it with a single, cleverly chosen gift. If I wasn't mistaken, Mrs. Thompson was already considering changing the heir. As soon as she arrived at the Thompson residence, Eliza couldn't wait to present her stolen prize. Grandmother, she said sweetly, I know you are a devout believer in Buddhism, so I specially acquired a Buddha statue for you. I hope you won't mind this small token of my affection. But Mrs. Thompson completely ignored her. Instead, she smiled and extended a hand to me. My dear child, come quickly. Come sit by my side. I know you love the quail soup, so I had the kitchen prepare it especially for you last night. She pulled me to sit beside her, treating me with the affection of a real grandmother. I stepped forward with a smile. We must be on the same wavelength. My stomach was just growling for that exact flavor. Mrs. Thompson couldn't help but laugh at my playful antics. From start to finish, she only spoke to me, not acknowledging Eliza even once. She even said, right in front of Eliza, Mark, as the eldest young master of the Thompson family, you will remain noble, whether you inherit the estate or not. You're not someone just any stray cat or dog can aspire to marry. Her words were a public slap to Eliza's face. I looked over and saw Eliza's cheeks flush a deep, humiliated red. Mark looked awkward. Grandmother, Eliza isn't like that. You see, knowing your devotion to Buddha, she specially prepared a statue as a gift for you. It was very thoughtful, please. For the sake of the child she's carrying, just take a look at her gift. I turned my gaze back to Mrs. Thompson, who remained indifferent, treating Eliza as if she were thin air. Eliza clenched her teeth in anger but maintained her pitiful facade. Grandmother, I sincerely prepared a gift for you. Please, just give me a chance. No need. The old woman's lips tightened into a stern line. I do not acknowledge you as my granddaughter-in-law. The Thompson family will never allow a woman who used despicable means to climb her way in through our doors. Mark. Eliza's tears began to fall, her face a mask of grievance. Mark also seemed troubled. If I guessed correctly, he must have been severely reprimanded by his grandmother these past few days, so he didn't dare speak up for Eliza anymore. I curled the corner of my lip, watching the scene unfold with amusement. Eliza, seeing she was getting nowhere, shifted tactics and tried to emotionally manipulate me. Sister, didn't you say you've already forgiven me? If you have, then please plead with grandmother for me. I just want to show my respect. Please grant me this wish. Hearing her words, I felt utterly disgusted. You want to show respect and you're asking for my permission? Are you trying to imply that if I don't help you, I'm the one preventing you from being a dutiful granddaughter-in-law? You reap what you sow, Eliza. You did something disgusting, and now you're trying to drag me into your mess when nobody likes you. You remember I'm your sister now? Did you think about me being your sister when you were climbing into Mark's bed? As expected, in this life as in the last, Eliza was just as disgusting. But this time, I decided to play along. Pretending to be magnanimous, I said to Mrs. Thompson, "Grandmother, why don't you just take a look? Maybe my sister really did put her heart into preparing it." Eliza was surprised that I would plead for her so easily, but she didn't have time to dwell on it and immediately put on a pitiful act. "Yes, Grandma, I went to great effort to obtain this statue. I knelt outside the temple for 3 days and nights. My legs are covered in bruises. My devotion is witnessed by the Buddha himself." Hearing this, I found it even more ridiculous. Kneeling until your legs were bruised? You stole it from my study. Eliza, you can lie so effortlessly. Mrs. Thompson saw me pleading for Eliza, and though she was displeased, she eventually relented. "Fine. For Clara's sake, I'll take a look. Bring it here." I was about to take the box, but Eliza pushed me aside and flatteringly handed the Buddha statue directly to the old lady. "Grandmother, this is a token of respect from your granddaughter-in-law. Please." Before she could finish her sentence, Mrs. Thompson, upon seeing the statue in the box, angrily slapped Eliza across the face, sending her tumbling to the ground. "Eliza, you wretched woman, how dare you curse me?" I watched Eliza's panicked expression, slowly curling my lips into a smile, my eyes glinting with a cold light. The fish had taken the bait, the show had finally begun. I sat beside Mrs. Thompson, coldly watching Eliza sprawled on the floor. The gazes of everyone in the room were fixed on the Buddha statue. It was carved from pristine white jade, with a solemn and majestic appearance, exquisitely lifelike. What was even more astonishing was that the face of the Buddha bore a slight resemblance to that of Mrs. Thompson. If Eliza had truly prepared such a gift, it would have been impossible for the old lady not to like it. But what had enraged her was that the moment the box was opened, the statue began to bleed from its eyes, nose, and mouth. "Eliza, what is the meaning of this? Sending me a statue with blood streaming from its face?" Mrs. Thompson immediately assumed Eliza was cursing her for not allowing her into the family. I watched this scene with a calm expression, but a surge of vengeful pleasure welled up in my heart. Round one was mine. Eliza could no longer possibly gain the matriarch's favor. From the beginning, I had deliberately let Eliza overhear me talking about the statue, luring her into the trap. Then, I had poured red candle wax into the statue's orifices. Based on my knowledge from my past life, I knew Mrs. Thompson feared the cold, so the indoor temperature of her home would be much higher than outside. Eliza wouldn't have noticed any issues with the statue when she stole it. Only upon arriving at the warm Thompson home would the wax melt and flow out. This round tested not only my wits, but also my understanding of both the old lady and Eliza. "You vile woman! Are you deliberately cursing me? You know I worship Buddha, yet you bring me a bleeding statue to disgust me. Mark, this is the fine woman you found. For this wretch, you'd even neglect your own grandmother." Mrs. Thompson now detested not only Eliza, but had also dragged Mark into her displeasure. Eliza shook her head frantically. "No, it's not me, Grandma. She framed me. This statue was prepared by Clara. She's the one who set me up." Her eyes turned bloodshot as she lunged forward to strangle me. "Clara, you bitch! I knew you mentioned the Buddha statue in front of me for a reason yesterday. You set me up. How dare you?" Just as her hands were about to close around my neck, a pair of slender, elegant hands intercepted them. "Miss Evans, harming my fiancé in my own home seems rather inappropriate, don't you think?" The man's voice was as refreshing as a mountain spring. I looked up and saw that it was Daniel Thompson. He had an exceptionally handsome appearance. His face was striking, with sharp, well-defined features that exuded a quiet masculine charm. His eyes sparkled like stars, revealing a deep kindness and warmth. It was only because of the chronic poison Mark was feeding him that his lips were slightly pale. Daniel grabbed Eliza's wrist. He was smiling, but his grip was far from gentle, squeezing until her face contorted in pain. "Miss Evans, you'd better keep your hands to yourself from now on." With that, he released her abruptly. Eliza screamed and fell to the ground. I stared at him in shock, my vision blurring for a moment as the scenes from my past and present lives overlapped. Daniel always seemed to appear to rescue me from danger. I panicked for only a second before regaining my composure. The show wasn't over. Eliza knew how to play the victim, but I could play that game too. With reddened eyes, I said to her, "Sister, what are you talking about? This Buddha statue was clearly the gift you prepared for Grandma Thompson just a moment ago. You were the one saying you knelt for 3 days and nights to get it. How could it suddenly become mine? Grandma, I'm truly at a loss. Please stand up for me." With that, I took out a handkerchief to dab at my dry eyes. Mrs. Thompson, upon hearing this, became even more furious. "Eliza, you wretched creature! It was clearly you who wished to curse me, and now you dare to falsely accuse your sister. Someone throw her out. I never want to see her again." Eliza panicked instantly. "No, grandmother, I was truly framed. I only thought the statue was beautiful and wanted to present it to you. It was Clara who chose a statue that would bleed. She's the one who intended to curse you." "Is that so?" Just as I was about to defend myself, Daniel suddenly grasped my cold hand. He gave me a look, signaling that I didn't need to worry. Then he pointed at the wooden box in Eliza's hand and said, "So, you stole this Buddha statue from my fiancé?" Eliza didn't want to admit to stealing, but to clear her name, she had no choice. I just thought it looked nice and wanted to. Taking without asking is theft. So all that talk about devout prayers and bruised knees was just a lie to deceive everyone? Daniel stared directly into her eyes, his gaze sharp and unyielding. I I just. Eliza's face flushed crimson. She looked up pitifully, seeking help from Mark. He had no choice but to step forward. "Uncle." "Nephew, I know you like Eliza, but a person must have principles." Daniel interrupted him coldly. I couldn't help but applaud him in my heart. "Well said." Daniel continued, addressing Eliza. "You thought you could shift the blame onto Clara, but you didn't realize you've already exposed yourself." "What?" Eliza bit her lower lip, resentment barely concealed in her eyes. "Uncle, you can't favor Clara just because she's your fiancé. I won't accept this." "You don't accept it? Fine." Daniel pointed at the box again. "Look at the box in your hand. Clara is a devout follower of Buddhist teachings. If she were preparing a Buddha statue, she would use a sandalwood container. However, you are holding a box made of mulberry wood. Mulberry wood is also known as soul-summoning wood, which is greatly disliked in Buddhism. Therefore, this statue must have been prepared by someone who doesn't understand Buddhist principles." I immediately chimed in. "Grandmother, all the gifts I've given you in the past were packaged in sandalwood boxes. If you don't believe me, you can send someone to check. Mulberry wood is considered inauspicious. I would absolutely never use it for a gift box." Daniel led the attack, and I delivered the finishing blow. We worked in perfect sync, nailing Eliza to the pillar of shame. "Damn it!" Mrs. Thompson was so furious that she threw her teacup, which shattered at Eliza's feet. Mark was also splashed with hot water. Because of this incident, the old matriarch disliked Eliza even more, and her attitude toward her own grandson also worsened considerably. My knowledge from 2 lifetimes made me realize Eliza would definitely come to steal the statue. I just didn't expect Daniel to help me in such a significant way. Upon our first real meeting, my heart was filled with a mix of emotions. Thinking about how he was poisoned in my past life made it even more heartbreaking. I had to do something to stop it. "Grandma, Daniel, I need to talk to him for a moment." Mrs. Thompson was taken aback, then held my hand with an even kinder smile. "I was worried you might get stuck on your past with Mark." "Ah, good. Very good. It's wonderful that you're willing to build a relationship with Daniel. Daniel, your fiancé wants to chat. Hurry over." She playfully urged him on. The old lady was extremely satisfied with me as her future daughter-in-law, which was why she was so furious when Mark caused that incident. Now that she saw I was willing to interact with Daniel, she was naturally overjoyed. Eliza ground her teeth in fury. Why? Why does everyone like Clara? What kind of spell has she cast on everyone? Grandma, I'm innocent. It was my sister who framed me. She continued to protest, but no one paid her any attention. Daniel led me to the small garden at the back of the house, his manner gentlemanly and his gaze as warm as I remembered from my past life. Watch your step, he said softly. The garden is lovely, but the ground is a bit uneven. Next time you visit, I'll have the gardener level it. I gazed into his deep, obsidian-like eyes. The world around me seemed to fade away, my heart filled only with the memory of him bringing me porridge in my past life. Originally, I had planned to subtly hint that he should be careful, but now I decided to tell him the truth directly. Do you drink a cup of Junshan Silver Needle tea every morning? He seemed surprised by my question, but answered nonetheless. I do, but that's a personal habit. How did you know? That particular tea was known to be good for digestion, so he had made it a morning ritual. My heart filled with sorrow. I knew all too well that in our past life, he was killed by the slow-acting poison mixed into that very tea. It was a pity I had realized it too late, when he was already beyond saving. Given a second chance, I would not let that tragedy repeat itself. I grabbed his arm, my grip firm, and said with the utmost seriousness, "Stop drinking it. Someone has put something in the tea." He froze for a moment, then shook his head with a self-mocking smile. Clara, with my poor health, why would anyone bother trying to harm me? What if I told you it's because you drank that tea that your health started deteriorating in the first place? I looked straight into his eyes and said, enunciating each word, Daniel, think carefully. Did your health problems start after you began drinking that tea every day? I recalled from my past life that Daniel was actually Mrs. Thompson's originally intended heir, but his health had gradually declined, giving Mark the opportunity to rise. As I spoke, Daniel seemed to fall into deep thought. His brows furrowed and his gaze gradually sharpened, flashing with a chilling light. It was Mark. He spoke the name quietly. Often, the one who benefits the most is the murderer. With my health failing, the primary beneficiary in the Thompson family would be Mark? I nodded. Talking with intelligent people is always effortless. Thank you for telling me this. I might never have noticed my nephew's ambitions otherwise. But to share this with me at our first meeting? Aren't you afraid of being too frank? Too soon? Daniel looked at me with an intense interest in his eyes. I smiled faintly, a trace of life finally returning to my pale cheeks. Didn't you also help me put on a grand performance when we first met? If I'm not mistaken, you knew from the beginning that this was a trap I had set. Yet not only did you not expose me, you even helped me. That proves you're still the same kind-hearted person you were in my past life. Such a good person shouldn't have to meet such a tragic end. I looked at him steadily. Besides, I believe some people remain strangers even after years together, while others become close friends at first sight. When we left the Thompson home, Daniel personally drove me back. Eliza, who had been stewing in silence the whole way home, suddenly slapped the maid beside her. Mark, why didn't he come to see me off? The servant covered her face and trembled. Miss, the eldest young master has been detained at home by the matriarch. She says she wants to arrange another marriage for him. Eliza trembled with rage upon hearing this, her face twisting in fury. What? Another marriage? I just got rid of Clara and now someone else is trying to steal my position? No, no one can take my place, no one. Her eyes darted around and she deliberately squeezed out a few pitiful tears before clutching her stomach and collapsing dramatically in front of the Thompson family's main gate. After returning home, my grandmother cheerfully said to me, Clara, your wedding with Daniel is approaching. The Thompsons have ordered many wedding dresses from abroad. Come and pick some out. As the bride-to-be, you should start preparing. Who knows what kind of spell Eliza cast on Mark, but even after causing such a huge mess, he remained devoted to her. He even managed to convince his father to let her into the family after she gave birth. Eliza had been insufferably smug these past few days, believing she had secured a higher status than me and going out of her way to look down on me. Grandma, let me pick the wedding dress first. she declared in our living room. Mark is about to become the heir of the Thompson family, so the wedding must be perfect. As for my sister, she's just marrying a sickly man. She can have whatever dress I don't want. Even though we're both marrying into the Thompson family, there's still a clear hierarchy. With that, she looked at me smugly. Clara, what does it matter if you scheme against me? What does it matter if old Mrs. Thompson doesn't like me? As long as I can win Mark's heart, I'll still be the matriarch, and you'll still be beneath me. My grandmother immediately retorted coldly. You stole your sister's fiancé, got pregnant before marriage, and now you have the nerve to demand you pick a wedding dress first? Aren't you afraid of becoming a joke? Eliza was already seething with anger at the Thompson family, and upon hearing my grandmother's words, her eyes reddened. Grandma, Mark and I are in love. How can you call it stealing? Besides, Clara framed me with that bleeding statue. Why are you only taking her side? She's your granddaughter, but so am I. My grandmother's expression was cold. If I could, I'd rather not acknowledge you as my granddaughter. And you claim Clara framed you? Fine. Even if that statue was prepared by your sister, if you hadn't stolen it, could she have forced it into your hands? You claim you were framed, but if you hadn't harbored selfish and wicked thoughts, who could have made you commit such a brazen act? And now you still have the audacity to argue with me. Just as Eliza was about to explode with anger, the wedding expert contacted by my grandmother and the Thompson family's butler arrived. The butler smiled at me and said, Miss Evans, these wedding dresses were specially prepared for you by the Thompson matriarch. Please make your selection. Eliza couldn't help but exclaim, Why does she get to choose first? I'm the future mistress of the Thompson family. The butler said coldly, Miss Evans, your child hasn't been born yet. Who knows if it's a boy or a girl? Besides, who wears a wedding dress with such a large belly? Do you want the whole city to laugh at the Thompson family? But Mark promised me the grandest wedding, Eliza began to protest. The butler cut her off. I'm sorry, Miss Evans, but the Thompson family is entirely under the matriarch's control. Even the eldest young master must obey her. Besides, the matriarch has already arranged a new marriage alliance for him. If the child in your belly isn't a boy, who knows who the future lady of the family will be? Someone, take Miss Evans away to rest. Don't let her wander around. She may not be ashamed of her big belly, but the Thompson family certainly is. As soon as he finished speaking, several servants stepped forward and roughly dragged a struggling Eliza out of the room. I sneered inwardly. Those who do not respect themselves will never earn the respect of others. Although Mark's father declared that Eliza could enter the family if she gave birth to a boy, not a single person in the Thompson household held her in any regard. The agony of being isolated and disdained that I had experienced in my past life, Eliza was now tasting for herself. Having been treated unjustly, Eliza immediately went to Mark to play the victim. Mark, brainless as ever, publicly threatened his grandmother, saying that if the family continued to trouble Eliza, he would rebel. Enraged, the old lady slapped him twice in public. She could clearly see that Mark was being manipulated by Eliza. I heard that Mrs. Thompson was so furious that day that she even declared that if Mark caused any more trouble, Eliza would never set foot in their home again. Eliza was thoroughly frightened into submission after that. Mrs. Thompson, detesting Eliza, wasted no time in finding a new marriage prospect for Mark, arranging for everyone to meet on Sunday. As the family's future daughter-in-law, I was naturally invited. Mrs. Thompson had chosen Claire Yu, the eldest daughter of the prominent Yu family, who was not only strikingly beautiful, but also had a bold, confident personality. If it weren't for the Yu family's patriarch being gravely ill and wishing to see his daughter married before his passing, Mark wouldn't have been a match for her at all. But shortly after I sat down, something utterly shocking happened. Mark actually brought Eliza along. Moreover, Eliza was dressed even more lavishly than the day's main star, Claire Yu, her arm linked tightly with Mark's, her eyes brimming with triumph. He had brought his pregnant, illegitimate lover to his own matchmaking banquet? The entire room was stunned. I was dumbfounded. They say love makes people blind, and at that moment, I finally believed it. Mark was throwing all reason to the wind. He wasn't just slapping his grandmother in the face, he was humiliating the entire Yu family. Sure enough, when I looked up, Mr. and Mrs. Yu's faces were livid. They pointed at Eliza and said, "Mrs. Thompson, we sincerely wish to become family with you. What is the meaning of this?" Mrs. Thompson hurried forward to placate them. "Please, it's not what you think." But before she could finish, Mark stiffened his neck and declared with deep affection to Eliza, "It is exactly as you see. Eliza is the love of my life. I will marry no one but her." Before he could finish his sentence, his grandmother slapped him hard, sending him stumbling to the ground. "You wretched creature!" Eliza immediately burst into tears and made a show of shielding Mark. "Grandma, please don't hit him anymore. He didn't mean it. He only did it for me and the baby." Watching her act, I subconsciously touched my own flat stomach. The expressions on the Yu family's faces turned even uglier. Mark, completely oblivious to Eliza's performance, said with a pained expression, "Eliza, it's all my fault for not being able to marry you sooner, but rest assured you're the only one in my heart." The Yu couple looked utterly disgusted. Mrs. Thompson's fingers trembled with rage. "Mark, are you truly determined to oppose me for that low-born wench?" He replied with great solemnity, "Grandmother, how can you call her low-born? By birth, Eliza is also an Evans, and the Evans family is an established lineage." My grandmother, who was also present, immediately retorted, "Master Thompson, mind your words. Our family cannot tolerate such shameless behavior. From the moment she seduced her brother-in-law, I struck her name from the family registry." Her words made it clear Mark could be with Eliza, but he shouldn't expect any support from us. The Evans family only acknowledged me as their daughter. At this one event, Mark managed to offend his grandmother, the powerful Yu family, and my own family. His once solid position as heir had begun to crumble. The shareholders who supported him became so anxious, they forced him to go on a series of blind dates, or else they would remove him from his position. William, initially defiant, began attending meeting after meeting, day after day. He met the daughter of one family, the young lady of another, each one a wealthy heiress. He thought he could secure his position all by himself, but in aristocratic families, marriage is a business transaction. In the days that followed, Mark was so busy, he barely had time to see Eliza. He was running around trying to maintain the illusion that everything was normal, but I knew his time as heir was running out. My younger sister, however, was as cunning as ever. She cried one day and made a scene the next, keeping Mark wrapped around her finger. Although he was socializing constantly, he would return every night to their little home to be with her. Rumor has it that for Mark's sake, Eliza even skipped Mrs. Thompson's birthday banquet. To buy luxury goods for her, he even sold off some of his personal shares. Mark was taking advantage of being the eldest grandson, openly defying his grandmother. Eliza, spoiled to the point of absurdity, actually boasted in high society circles. Mark said that although he can't marry me right away, once I have the child, he will give me a grand wedding and hand over the family's management rights to me. His relationships with those other women are all fake. As soon as these words spread, any potential matchmaking candidates stopped believing his nonsense. On the surface, Mark remained the heir, but beneath it, he had lost all support and was besieged on all sides. I knew that Daniel hadn't been idle during this time. He had set up a shell company overseas and was steadily acquiring Mark's shares, even buying out several key properties from his holdings, ensuring a swift and decisive takeover when the time came. I had only known Daniel as gentle and refined. I never expected his business tactics to be so shrewd. It seemed there were still many things I didn't know. Daniel noticed me sitting silently beside him one evening and took my cold hand, thinking he had frightened me. "Clara, do you think my methods are too ruthless?" I shook my head, looking at his face, which was almost identical to the one from my past life, and smiled as I squeezed his hand. "No, never, because you are my benefactor." More importantly, in my past life, I had witnessed cruelty far beyond this. Now I only regretted that what was coming for Mark wasn't worse. Daniel was startled by the intense hatred that flashed in my eyes, a flicker of concern on his face. He seemed to wonder what a girl like me could have been through to harbor such deep animosity. Mark was so immersed in his life of pleasure that he failed to notice his influence being gradually eroded. When Daniel acquired the final 10% of his shares, our wedding date was finally set. Although Claire Yu didn't marry into the Thompson family, she and I had unexpectedly become good friends. Of course, she was there on my wedding day. Gazing at my reflection in the mirror, Claire couldn't help but sigh. Clara, you're truly blessed. Heaven knew that Mark wasn't worth it, so it orchestrated that whole incident with your sister to save you from disaster. I'm not so lucky. Hearing her words, I understood immediately. Ever since she had caught the eye of Mrs. Thompson, Eliza had been guarding against her fiercely. Even though Claire had no interest in Mark, Eliza wouldn't let go of her suspicions. Eliza has always been unhinged. Her choosing to jump to her death in her previous life was proof enough. So, Claire must have been having an extremely unpleasant time lately. Eliza is definitely coming to the wedding banquet today, she said. It's so annoying. Do you have any way to deal with her? I just smiled. Do you really want to deal with her? Of course. You have no idea how she's been treating me. She actually spread rumors that I'm promiscuous. Can you believe how despicable that is? Claire gritted her teeth in fury. Promiscuous? My expression darkened. I had expected Eliza to cause trouble, but I never imagined she'd stoop so low. Only women truly understand the devastating power of such rumors. A single sentence could ruin a person's life. My sister's cruelty never failed to exceed my imagination. Originally, I hadn't wanted to make a move against her at my own wedding, but now it seemed the plans Daniel and I had made would have to be moved up. I looked at Claire and said, dealing with Eliza is simple, just 2 words, flatter her. You mean, she asked, intrigued. It's only when a person is at their most triumphant that they are most likely to reveal their flaws. And once those flaws are exposed, they're no longer invincible. Do you understand? I explained. Claire caught on immediately and eagerly rubbed her hands together. Got it. Today I'll flatter her to the heavens. At my wedding, led by Claire, a group of young ladies from noble families lavished praise on Eliza. Some envied her for soon marrying into a prestigious family. Some said she had men wrapped around her finger, and others even begged her to teach them the art of managing their husbands. Claire even raised a toast to her, a rare gesture of submission. Eliza had never received so much attention before. Drink after drink, it wasn't long before her face was flushed. Seeing she was completely drunk, I deliberately drew over a few business magnates, men who had long been displeased with her frivolous and arrogant demeanor. I stepped forward to toast her myself, the large diamond ring on my finger dazzling her. It was a clear sign that I had still married into wealth before she had. Eliza already harbored an extreme hatred for me, and now, fueled by the crowd's flattery and the alcohol, she lost her senses and violently knocked over my wineglass. Clara, your gloating won't last long, she slurred. Once I marry into the Thompson family, I'll be the mistress of the house. You and your sickly husband will have to grovel at my feet. Even that old crone, the Thompson matriarch, will have to listen to me. When I tell you to kneel, you won't dare stand. Had she not been drunk, she never would have uttered such outrageous words. But in her drunken stupor, she blurted out her true thoughts. The surrounding business tycoon's expressions darkened instantly. Stealing her own sister's fiancé was despicable enough, but now she was openly disrespecting the family matriarch. I knew her words today would inevitably reach Mrs. Thompson's ears. The death knell had officially tolled. After accomplishing my task, I returned to my room, exhausted. Knowing that Daniel was still being held up by guests, I decided to take a short nap. No sooner had I closed my eyes than the door opened. Startled, I was about to turn on the light when I heard a familiar, gentle voice. It's me. A pair of warm hands grasped mine. My hands are always cold, and Daniel had recently developed a habit of warming them for me. You're back so early? I thought they'd keep you for drinks. Being in close contact with a man again, my body stiffened slightly. He chuckled softly. What's more important than keeping my wife company? Besides, who would be tactless enough to get the groom drunk on his wedding day? He seemed to sense my nervousness and eased my defenses with a half-joking tone. The failed marriage in my past life had left me with deep scars. I once thought I would live alone after getting my revenge, but Daniel had suddenly entered my life. Perhaps it was my grandmother's advice, or perhaps it was that bowl of hot porridge from my past. I always had a different feeling toward him. I couldn't quite figure out what it was, but Now, looking into his eyes that shone brightly even in the dim room, I think I understood. It was a sense of security. As long as he was here, I never had to be afraid. Daniel, I whispered, if one day you discover that I'm not as kind as you imagine, that I too can scheme against others, would you still love me like this? Silly you. He pulled me into his embrace, planting tender kisses by my ear. In this world, who doesn't scheme, and who isn't schemed against? Besides, I know you're not the kind of person who would harm others without reason. Don't be afraid. I'll always stand by your side. Always stand by your side. Tears streamed down my face. What I had begged for my entire past life, I had somehow obtained in this one without even realizing it. I gazed at his face, still sharply defined in the darkness. Perhaps heaven had not been unkind to me after all. Half a month after Daniel and I got married, his complexion grew increasingly better. Mrs. Thompson also put the matter of replacing the heir on the agenda. At the shareholders' meeting, she cited Mark being surrounded by treacherous individuals who intended to harm the family as a reason to strip him of his position. However, Mark had been the designated heir for many years and still had the support of many shareholders. As a result, she failed to replace him this time. Mark finally realized that his grandmother's deep-seated hatred for Eliza had extended to him. To secure his position, he stopped visiting Eliza and instead stayed home to accompany the old matriarch. However, Mrs. Thompson had been bedridden for days due to the foolish remarks Eliza made at my wedding, and her health was no longer robust. For the latest international business deal, she lacked the energy to handle it and entrusted it to Mark. But before he could even board the plane, Eliza threw a tantrum, crying and claiming she was unwell, demanding he return. Mark actually left the important client hanging and rushed back. The shareholders who supported him were furious. This deal was the company's most significant collaboration in years, but Mark ignored all objections and even punched one of his most loyal supporters. The other shareholders witnessing this felt a sense of impending doom. Mark had ruined a $100 million deal over a woman. What could a man controlled by a woman possibly achieve? Eliza not only insisted on seeing Mark, but also threatened to kill herself unless she met with me. I immediately realized it was a trap, but seeing her in such a desperate state, I still went. To avoid any tricks, I brought Claire Yu along. I walked into the hospital room while she stood outside, recording with her phone. You called for me, I said, looking at Eliza on the sickbed, my eyes a mixture of weariness and disgust. Sister, it's been so long. Why are you standing so far away? Are you afraid I might harm you? Eliza's face was extremely pale, but her eyes were frighteningly dark. If you have nothing important to say, I'm very busy. Clara, why are you so lucky? She snarled. Your background, your looks, even your sickly husband's health has improved. And now you're trying to steal the position of heir. I'm telling you, don't even think about it. With that, she seemed to make a resolute decision, standing up abruptly and slamming her stomach into the sharp corner of the table. Instantly, her hospital gown was drenched in blood, yet a twisted smile spread across her face. Ha ha, Clara, you're finished. You killed my child. When Mark returns, he'll never let you off. Neither will the Thompson matriarch. Let's see how you'll manage to stay in the family then. I am the matriarch. I am the one and only matriarch. Watching her deranged state sent chills down my spine. She was truly insane. To frame me, she would even kill her own child. Eliza, that was your child. I stared at the pool of blood beneath her and shouted. In my past life, I had watched as my own child was killed, enduring unbearable heartbreak. Yet Eliza used her child as a bargaining chip. So what? She said maliciously. I might as well tell you, the child in my womb was never Mark's to begin with. I was already 2 months pregnant before I even got with him. If this child were born, the truth would come out. So I might as well use it to get rid of you. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone, don't you think? I looked at her in astonishment. This was something I had never known. No wonder she had jumped off the building so decisively in her past life. So, when you said you were pregnant with Mark's child, she sneered. Mark was just a fool I found. If he weren't the eldest son of the Thompson family, would I have even looked at him? More importantly, I wanted to steal your position and crush you under my feet. Do you hate me now? Ha ha ha. Go on, complain to Mark. Tell him I just see him as a backup plan. Let's see who he believes, you or me. This blame is yours to bear. Before she could finish, hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Eliza! Eliza! Hearing Mark's voice, she gave me a twisted smile, then immediately put on the pitiful look of a delicate, wronged woman. Mark, it hurts so much. I'm sorry. I couldn't protect our child. Mark burst into the room and saw Eliza on the floor covered in blood, with me standing right in front of her. Clara! He roared, instantly going mad. He grabbed my throat, his eyes bloodshot. You wretched woman, what have you done to her? If anything happens to Eliza or the child, I'll send you straight to hell. Elizabeth revealed a sinister smile before quickly feigning kindness, coughing weakly. Mark, please don't. Though my sister has been cruel, I cannot be unjust. Even if she killed my child, she is still my own sister. Her heart-wrenching sobs only added fuel to the fire. Mark squeezed even harder, his large hands like iron clamps. I desperately grabbed his hands, broke free, and slapped him hard across the face. Enough, Mark. You're just a fool being played like a puppet. He grew even more furious. I ignored him and looked at Eliza, enunciating each word. Eliza, do you really think I'd be as foolish as I was before? Her already pale face turned ashen. What do you mean? Claire? I called out. Isn't it time you showed yourself? Immediately, Claire walked in with a cold smile. Eliza used to spread rumors about her, and now the boomerang had come back. Claire raised her phone. Mark, take a good look at what your beloved innocent flower is really like. She pressed play. Every word Eliza had said was clearly recorded. No, don't listen, Mark. They framed me. This video was edited. Eliza screamed and lunged for the phone, but she was too weak from the blood loss. The entire video finished playing. Mark froze. When he heard the child wasn't his, that Eliza had just used him, his gaze turned murderous. The woman he had fought so desperately for. Disloyal, deceitful, and utterly shameless. Eliza! He spat out each syllable through clenched teeth. She shuddered. No, it's not like that, Mark. Let me explain. It was Clara. She set me up. The evidence is right here, and you still dare to lie? He roared, the humiliation fueling his rage. He delivered a vicious slap across her face, sending her flying. 5 red finger marks instantly appeared on her cheek. But misfortunes never come singly. Bad news soon reached Mark. Mrs. Thompson had learned he'd ruined the $100 million deal for Eliza and had directly called to revoke his position as heir. At that moment, Mark was filled with despair. It was over. He had lost the woman he loved and his position as heir. Eliza went mad upon hearing this. What? Mark is no longer the heir? What about my position as the mistress? She suddenly glared at me and snarled, It's you, Clara. It's you again. Do you think harming us will let you take over the Thompson family? You're dreaming. We are both from the same family. If I lose face, you won't get off easy either. Mark couldn't take it anymore and began stomping wildly on her stomach. You bitch, he screamed. How dare you falsely accuse others at a time like this? He then grabbed my shoulders with a frenzied look. Clara, you still love me, don't you? You did all this to prove you still care. As long as you help me secure my position as heir, I'll marry you. Can't we go back to how we were? His deranged expression was a perfect match for Eliza's. I broke free from him. Mark, from the moment you cheated with Eliza, there hasn't been a shred of feeling left between us. Moreover, I am your uncle's wife. By rights, you should address me as Aunt. My words were like a spark igniting his fury. The former Clara was devoted to him. Yet in such a short time, she had cast him aside. He had grown accustomed to me following him, and now that I no longer had him in my eyes, he first felt anger, then panic. Clara, didn't you like me the most? You just married him a few days ago and now you call yourself my aunt? Was your affection always so cheap? I found it laughable. He called my affection cheap? After our engagement, he had cheated on me and humiliated me countless times. I couldn't be bothered with this deranged couple and turned to leave. He shouted behind me, his voice a heart-wrenching rage. Clara, do you really look down on me that much? Do you think I'll definitely lose to Daniel? Just you wait. I paused but didn't turn back. Although Mrs. Thompson announced Daniel as the new heir, whenever I recalled Mark's frantic, resentful expression, I still felt a chill. I always felt he was going to stir up more trouble. Daniel kept comforting me, but a woman's intuition is terrifyingly accurate. Mark reappeared in the Thompson estate after half a month. Surprisingly, Eliza, who had supposedly broken up with him, was still by his side. Mrs. Thompson thought he had come to beg for his position back. There's no need to beg. In 3 days, I will hand over the position to your uncle. You disregarded $1 billion contract for this wretched woman. I no longer need a grandson like you. She had completely lost hope in him. I watched with cold detachment, but then something unexpected happened. Mark didn't bring up reinstatement. Instead, he knelt by her bedside, deeply repenting. Grandmother, I know I was wrong. I'll never do it again. I only beg to stay by your side with Eliza to serve you. Please give us this chance. The old lady seemed visibly moved. He continued wailing. Grandmother, I don't want anything anymore. I only beg you to acknowledge me as your grandson. Eliza knelt beside him in silence, wiping her tears. Her face was deathly pale from her miscarriage, making her look like a helpless flower battered by a storm. Grandmother, it was all my fault. Please don't blame Mark. My child is gone. I beg you, let us stay. Her sorrowful weeping was enough to evoke compassion. I furrowed my brows. An ominous premonition grew stronger in my heart. Mark knew Eliza's child wasn't his, so why was he willing to bring her back? Could his feelings be so deep he'd willingly accept her infidelity? But if he cared so deeply, he wouldn't have kicked her so violently. For the first time since my rebirth, I couldn't understand what these two were thinking. Mrs. Thompson ultimately softened her heart. After all, he was her flesh and blood, and he had relinquished his position. She chose to let them stay. I felt something was off and told Daniel to stay on guard. Yet, despite all precautions, the unexpected still occurred. On the third day, just as Daniel was about to assume the heir's position, our new home echoed with Eliza's heart-wrenching scream. Today was the day Daniel was to take over. Relatives, friends, and shareholders had gathered at our home. When I heard the screams and rushed to our bedroom, Daniel's hands and arms were drenched in red wine. Eliza had all the buttons on her dress burst open, clutching her exposed chest. She wailed, "Assault! How could you do this to me, Uncle? I'm your niece-in-law." The crowd that had come to congratulate Daniel was utterly stunned. Witnessing this scene, my blood ran cold. It brought back memories of my past life, when Mark and Eliza had appeared naked in our new home. But I only panicked for a moment. My husband was Daniel, not that despicable William. I had confidence he wouldn't betray me. This had to be a trap. They deliberately caused this incident today to tarnish Daniel's reputation and prevent him from succeeding as the heir. Sure enough, the next moment, Mark arrived, feigning surprise. "Eliza, what's going on?" She immediately threw herself onto him, weeping dramatically. "Mark, I can't go on living. I only meant to kindly toast my brother-in-law to congratulate him, but he tried to take advantage of me. If you hadn't arrived in time, he would have..." She buried her head in her hands, weeping bitterly. At this moment, I finally pieced together their entire scheme. I couldn't help but narrow my eyes. No wonder they insisted on staying. They had been planning this all along. Mark raged. "Uncle, how could you do this to Eliza? She's my betrothed wife." Eliza also wailed. "You lecherous beast! You even prey on your own niece-in-law. What right do you have to be the heir? Everyone, stand up for me." Her innocent face was now filled with hatred and madness. "Clara, if I can't have it, neither will you." That day in the hospital, Eliza had almost been discarded by Mark. It must have been she who came up with this vicious scheme, which is why he brought her back. I watched her with cold eyes, then scanned the room. "Eliza, is what you said really true?" Mark snarled. "Clara, even if he is your husband, the fact remains that he committed such a beastly act. Do you still want to shield him?" He couldn't understand why the woman who was so in love with him just a month ago had suddenly changed so completely. I sneered coldly. Of course, he couldn't comprehend the depth of enmity between us. Mrs. Thompson was quickly drawn over. "What are you arguing about on such a joyous day?" she demanded. Eliza saw her and rushed over. Yes, "Grandma, Daniel tried to rape me. I beg you to stand up for me or I'll dash my head against the wall and die right here." The old lady's vision darkened. She looked at Daniel in disbelief. She knew him well. He was not the type to be controlled by base desires. But why was Eliza in their bedroom? Her face hardened. "If Daniel has truly wronged you, I will not let him off lightly. But if someone is deliberately framing him, I won't spare them either." Eliza shrank back slightly, but soon mustered her courage. "Grandmother, feel free to investigate. The pure remain pure, and the filthy stay filthy." Having said that, she glared at me viciously. I couldn't be bothered with her and walked over to Daniel, whispering, "Despite all our precautions, we still couldn't outmaneuver them." He smiled bitterly. "I was too reckless and fell into their trap." I shook my head. It wasn't his recklessness, it was their shamelessness. At this moment, I was determined not to let them stir up trouble any longer. They had to pay a bloody price. Mrs. Thompson ordered them to be taken to the main hall for questioning. She sat and said coldly, "Eliza, you said Daniel tried to rape you. Explain what happened." Eliza immediately wiped her tears. "I knew today was my brother-in-law's special day, so I came to toast him. But as soon as he saw me, he went crazy and tried to tear off my clothes." She broke down in tears, and the crowd below was utterly confused. The matriarch then turned to Daniel. "Daniel, what do you have to say?" He replied calmly, "Madam, I never touched her clothes, nor did I act improperly toward her." Mark snarled, "That's bullshit. If you didn't pull her clothes, how did they come off? If you didn't assault her, did she throw herself at you?" I almost let out a cold laugh. Coveting Eliza's beauty? "Mark, did you think everyone was as brainless as you?" Daniel also spoke bluntly. "What kind of person I am, many of the uncles here know well. Over all these years, have you ever heard a single scandal about me? Why would I suddenly assault my sister-in-law on such an important day? Others might do such things, but I, Daniel Thompson, would never." As soon as he said this, everyone's gaze immediately turned toward Mark, the one with a history of making advances on his sister-in-law. Mark reacted as if someone had stepped on his tail. "Daniel, stop beating around the bush. The fact that you took liberties with my wife is indisputable. If you know what's good for you, admit it now." I added fuel to the fire. "Admit what? Why should we admit something that never happened?" "Mark, the old lady hasn't even finished investigating, and you're already so eager to pin the blame on your uncle. What's your logic? Do you actually wish he would misbehave with your wife?" Mark broke into a cold sweat. He had acted too hastily. "I was just momentarily outraged. The facts are laid out before us. Daniel may have been a gentleman in the past, but who knows what he is now? He might be a wolf in sheep's clothing." William had always fallen short of his uncle, and now that he had a chance to tarnish his name, he wouldn't let it slip. But the crowd clearly didn't believe him. Cornered, he suddenly raised his fist to strike Daniel, but I sensed something was amiss. His fingernails had a faint layer of white powder on them. "Stop!" I shouted. Everyone froze. I grabbed Mark's hand and coldly addressed the crowd. "He has poison on his hands." As soon as I said this, Mark frantically shook me off. "Clara, don't talk nonsense!" He was covered in cold sweat, desperately trying to wipe off the powder. But I wouldn't give him the chance. "Grandma, where is the family doctor?" Mrs. Thompson frowned, but immediately had someone fetch him. I said to the doctor, "See what the young master has hidden under his fingernails." The doctor carefully scraped off a bit of powder, pinched it, and sniffed it. His face instantly turned grim. "It's cyanide." "Cyanide," my gaze turned icy. "Mark, do you have anything else to say?" His expression changed abruptly. He threw himself in front of his grandmother, feigning innocence. "Grandma, I don't know what this is. It must have gotten on me by accident." I retorted coldly. "An accident? Cyanide is a deadly poison. How could you just casually come into contact with it? If Daniel had been punched, scratched, and poisoned, you would surely claim later that it was a suicide out of guilt." Mrs. Thompson's face turned cold. Mark, you truly are my good grandson. How could you attempt to poison your own uncle? He immediately knelt, feigning pitifulness. Grandmother, no. I really don't know where it came from. How can you prove I intended to harm anyone? Besides, would I use my own fiancé's virtue to falsely accuse him? Eliza played along, squeezing out 2 tears. That's right, Grandma. As a pure girl, why would I use my own reputation to falsely accuse someone? Sister, uncle, are you trying to drive me to my death? I sneered. Pure? Someone who climbs into her own brother-in-law's bed dares to call herself pure? Then there are no filthy people left in this world. Eliza flushed with anger. Clara, what do you mean? Mark and I are in love. How does that make me impure? If you can't provide evidence, I'll sue you. At worst, we'll all go down together. Stimulated by me, she finally revealed her crazy side. I just chuckled lightly. You want evidence? Fine, I'll show you. Eliza's face, already pale, turned even whiter. Clara, don't you dare frame me. I'm innocent. Looking at my increasingly ferocious sister, I couldn't help but laugh at myself. Bringing her home was the worst decision of my life. But fortunately, fate had given me a chance to start over. Everything was finally coming to an end. I let out a long sigh and said to Mrs. Thompson, Grandma, I need a basin of clean water. A servant brought one over. I took Daniel's left hand, which was stained with red wine, and immersed it in the water. The wine spilled into the basin, turning the water a faint shade of red. I looked at Eliza. Do you dare take a sip? She turned pale. You want me to drink his hand-washing water? How disgusting! I won't! I glanced around at everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I've already proven Daniel's innocence. Everyone was still confused until a respected shareholder stepped forward. Miss Evans, what do you mean? Can a basin of water really prove his innocence? I nodded. Yes. Do you all remember that both Daniel and Eliza said she came to propose a toast? But when we arrived, Daniel wasn't drinking. Instead, there was alcohol on his arm. What does this indicate? Clearly, he broke free from that toast. Although the alcohol has mostly dried, it can still be diluted in water. Please, doctor, take another look and see what might be in this wine. The family doctor stepped forward and dipped his hand into the water. He sniffed it, then licked the water from his fingers. Suddenly, his gaze became unfocused, and his breathing grew rapid. I quickly splashed him with a nearby cup of tea. He snapped out of his daze and panicked. It's an aphrodisiac. This water has been laced with a full dose of aphrodisiac. William trembled violently. You're talking nonsense. Why would my fiancé do such a thing? Eliza was also terrified, her face deathly pale. Sister, you can't save your husband by throwing dirt on me. I'm the victim here, I sneered coldly. If I'm not mistaken, you put so much aphrodisiac in this wine just to completely frame Daniel for assaulting you, didn't you? Otherwise, given the size difference between you, if he really wanted to do something to you, would he even need aphrodisiacs? He could just cover your mouth. Do you honestly believe you'd make a single sound? Do you think he'd let you scream loud enough for all of us to come running? My words were a final death nail. Eliza completely broke down. The crowd suddenly understood. Yes, Daniel was a large man. If he really wanted to overpower a frail woman, it would be as easy as pie. I looked directly at them, enunciating each word clearly. The two of you have been scheming from the very beginning. First, you begged Grandma to let you stay. Then you deliberately chose the day Daniel was to take over to make your move. All this was to let the shareholders and relatives witness his true colors, making it impossible for him to assume the heir's position. That way, Mark would still have a chance. Am I right? Both of them were utterly shocked, staring at me as if they'd seen a ghost. Eliza gnashed her teeth. Clara, why must you always stand in my way? Why? At this moment, she could no longer maintain her innocent facade, her face twisting into a visage of utter ferocity. What rightfully should have been mine? The position of the Evans family's eldest daughter was stolen by you. And now the rightful place as the matriarch of the Thompson family is also being snatched away. No matter what I do, you always overshadow me. Why won't you just die? Why won't you die already? She let out a heart-wrenching roar, pouring out years of pent-up hatred. Hearing this, I could only feel scorn. Her position. Had she forgotten that if I hadn't taken her in, she would have nothing? And the matriarch position was only within her reach because she stole my fiancé. Yet she believed these things rightfully belonged to her. An ungrateful heart can never be warmed. Yet I failed to notice her eyes, which had shifted from ferocious to utterly deranged. Clara! Today I'll perish together with you! Her eyes bloodshot, she lunged at me like a madwoman. Clara, look out! Daniel's eyes widened, and he immediately leapt in front of me, forcefully pushing Eliza away. It was the first time I'd seen him look so tense, and I felt both surprised and warmed. But I didn't notice Mark, who was now casting an extremely venomous glare at both of us. Daniel! Clara! Go die together! He pulled out a pistol and fired 2 shots. Eliza was solely focused on strangling me, completely failing to see Mark with the gun. As she reached for my neck, she was impeccably positioned right in front of me. In the next instant, she let out a piercing scream as a bullet pierced her heart. Who could have imagined that the woman Mark had so deeply loved would end up dying by his own hand? Truly, what goes around comes around. Without a second thought, in that split second, I forcefully pushed Daniel away, taking the remaining bullet for him. His face instantly drained of color as he let out a heart-wrenching cry. Clara! Clara! I touched his pale face and smiled reassuringly. Don't be afraid. I've already died once before. In this life, the vengeance I needed has been taken, and the people I needed to protect have been protected. That's enough. My vision began to darken as I watched Eliza's lifeless, unblinking eyes and saw Mark being handcuffed and taken away by the police. Justice is served. My vengeance is finally complete. Eliza was dead, and Mark, that scumbag, would never recover from this. Daniel immediately carried me to the best hospital for treatment. Fortunately, the gunshot didn't hit any vital organs, and after 2 months, I was lucky enough to wake up. Later, under the court's investigation, all of Mark's dirty deeds over the years were uncovered, including his poisoning of Daniel. He was ultimately sentenced to death. That day, I made a special trip to witness the execution. Hearing the gunshot echo across the field, I finally felt at peace. All hatred dissipated into thin air. On the way home, Daniel swung my hand in his and said, "Darling, in the past, your eyes only held Mark and Eliza. From now on, could you look at me instead?" I smiled, looking at his handsome profile, my tone as gentle as a spring breeze. "All right, from now on, my eyes will only be on you."